Time for sound design. Today I'm gonna use the no input mixing technique again to create a sampled instrument in Ableton Live. So with me here on the desk I have a small mixer from Behringer, and I'm gonna use this mixer to create a feedback loop, record that feedback loop into Ableton, and then take a little piece out of that recording and throw that into Sampler to create a chromatic sampled instrument. So something that I can play over the keyboard in different notes basically. I've done a video before on no input mixing and how it works and what is the goal of no input mixing. So I'm not going to go too much in detail about that, but I will explain the routing that I did on this particular mixer for today's session. So let's go to the second camera on the desk and I'll show you what I did. In the meanwhile, I will record already the audio of the mixer in case I come up with a good sound and I already have it captured in Ableton. So the yellow and the red wires here are the main output of the mixer. They go into my sound card and I record them into Ableton. And then what I did to create this feedback loop is actually quite simple. I used the phone's output, so the headphones output, and put it into channel number 1. I turned up the gain all the way. The compressor is in the middle, and then the EQ, the bass is at 0 and a little bit less mid and highs. I don't use the effects, built-in effects. The panning is in the middle. And I turned up the volume of the channel to maybe like 40%. And I turned up some of the headphone volume as well. And now when I turn up the main mix, we already get some sound. So this is the feedback loop that is going on now. And the important thing is to watch the output level of the mixer into your sound card so you don't clip into your sound card. So the main volume slider of the mixer is actually very important to keep it kind of low. So I'll keep the main volume of the mixer as it is, and I will turn up the headphones output. And then when you look in Ableton, I have a tuner enabled. You can actually tune the sound exactly to a note if you want. It is kind of difficult to tune it, so you have to have a very steady hand and be very patient because you easily overshoot the note. Of course, you can later tune it in Ableton as well, so it's not really a problem. So yeah, now I'm basically gonna experiment a little bit, especially play also with the EQ knobs, the low mid and the high EQ to create different kind of tones, and do this for a couple of minutes and record everything into Ableton, and then I'll see you back in Ableton. Alright, so now that we have about 5 minutes of recording of noises, no input mixing noises in Ableton, let's go to the file and see if we can pick out a little piece and use that in Sampler. So as you can see, this is the file. That's a nice bass note. I like these kind of noisy sounds. Maybe try this and then lower it in pitch. So if we take out a little piece, open up Sampler, throw this in and zoom in. So first is to adjust the release time to only 500 milliseconds. This is the bass pitch. So it's already a C, it's just very off. Now we have a C. I'm gonna put it on C4 because it's a very clean sine wave. If we now loop this, we probably can get a very clean loop from this. Okay, the pitch is drifting, so I take a smaller piece to make sure that the pitch stays stable. There's a little bit of a click at the beginning, so I'm going to increase the attack time. I'm going to put it on one voice. So yeah, this is a very clean sine wave kind of tone. It's perfect for a bass. It's very... if you look, there's no overtones in this sample. And because there's no overtones, it's a bit maybe boring. So I'm going to add some distortion to it and then see if we can bring out a bit more interest out of this sound. Let's look at, yeah, maybe the roar effect again. Do a diode clipper. What if we actually change it to 4 voices? No, that doesn't sound good. Let's keep it at mono. So maybe let's add a arpeggiator to this to have, instead of a continuous sound, a sort of, yeah, arpeggiated short sound. Let's change the type, the style of arpeggiator. And then to create variation, we're gonna change the amount of stage 1 of the roar effect with an LFO. So over the course of 2 bars, we want it to go up to 40%. With an arpeggiator, you want to hold a chord down, but instead of having to do that, there's a MIDI effect where you can basically create a chord. So let's do that. Let's add the chord MIDI effect. And the cool thing here is now that in Ableton 12 there's a learn function. So instead of having to put in what is the chord, we can just hit learn and play it on the keyboard. So I used the learn feature on the chord MIDI device. So now that we have a chord played in, I can just hold one note on the keyboard and it plays a chord. right, so that is the first sound from the recording, turned it into an instrument. And now I would save this instrument into an instrument rack and add it to my library of sounds. So how I do that is I basically select all the devices. So the LFO, the roar, also the EQ, the tuner, the arpeggiator and the MIDI chord device, and group it into an instrument rack. And now I can save it as no input mixing arpeggiator chord. So later on when I want to use this, I can just load up a new Ableton session and drop this instrument into a MIDI track, and I have... Alright, so now that we have this instrument, let's go back to recording and find another sample that we can use to create a different instrument. I remember there was another sound that sounded a bit more raw. Yeah, it was this part, so let's try to use that. Let's drop it into an empty sampler. First change the release time to 100 milliseconds. And this is already a perfect C, so I don't even have to tune it, which is great. Let's turn on loop mode as well. Let's see if we can create a clean loop. Let's turn up the attack a bit. Let's also make this monophonic, so only one voice at a time. And for this one, maybe we can play with the filter that comes with sampler. So let's lower the filter a bit and also engage the filter envelope to create that kind of at the beginning of the note. So with this filter, we're basically closing the filter and we turn up the resonance. So that's why you get this nice kind of smooth, funky start of the sound where the filter is closing. If we close the filter too much, it doesn't work. And if we open it all the way, then it doesn't work either. So this is around 3 kilohertz. Let's see what we can add in terms of effects to this. So this bass sound sounds nice as it is with the filter opening up, and but to also turn this sound into a different kind of sound, I'm going to use a bandpass filter. And with the bandpass filter of the auto filter plus the LFO enabled, you basically only filter a little bit of the frequencies. And then instead of playing only short notes with the regular bass sound, now I can turn this bass sound into kind of a lead sound with taking all the bottom ends out. And when turning off the filter, you're back to your bass sound. So basically with adding that filter at the end, you can create two completely different sounds with the same instrument. I'm now going to package this into an instrument rack and use a button to turn the auto filter on and off so you can switch between the different sounds easily. So let me group all these things in an instrument rack and then map the on-off button of the filter to the first macro. And then it's called bandpass filter on off, BPF bandpass filter. So by default, it's off. So you have the bass sound, which sounds especially good when you play short notes. But if you want to turn the sound, transform it into a sort of lead or pad kind of sound, so I'm going to save this as no input mixing, bass and bandpass filter So I add it to my library of sounds, and then I can use them anytime I want to create a new track. All right, that was it for this video. So I started off with the Behringer mixer, creating a feedback loop by using the headphones output into the main input of channel 1, recording that into Ableton. A long session in this case was only 5 minutes. Typically when I do this not on video, I can go on for 20-30 minutes and then basically go back into that file and try to find sounds that are good. With no input mixing, it's very easy to create these very clean sort of sine wave sounds that are nice sometimes. So as I showed you in the first example, but you also want those kind of more noisy sounds. What I did on the no input mixing, I only used one cable, so I created a very basic feedback signal. You can create multiple channels and you can make it much more complex. But in any case, I found 2 sounds and created 2 instruments from that. And in this file, there's much more other sounds that I can use. Maybe not for instruments, but at least for like percussive sounds or little sound effects that I could sprinkle on top of a beat in an intro or in a transition. Let me know if you have tried no input mixing, what kind of sounds you get out, how you use them. Or maybe you create an entire composition just by no input mixing. Let me know in the comments. As always, keep making music. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.